Good morning. Reviewing the conclusion of Ayin Beis, we are on page 1424. We finished the paragraph, start the new one. What did we learn? Rabbi Rashab, in very condensed fashion, summed up the process of drawing down and revealing and experiencing Achdus Hashem, divine unity in our existence, which is essentially the mitzvah of Liyachid Hashem, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that in the Ches and Daled of Echad, which is the seven heavens and earth, and Dal Druch is the Daled, the four different directions, basically in space of our existence, we should recognize that it's all part of Aleph, the Achdus and Echad, all makes up the Achdus of Hashem, and it's all essentially divine reality. And of course, this isn't just an academic exercise. It has far-reaching implications of how you live your life. Do you live your life driven by self-interest, or is it driven by fulfilling the interest of God and the plan and the mission for which you were put in this world? So what we learned technically, the last pieces we learned was that the world is created with a multitude of diversity, and it's with a structure, and it's our job is retrace the steps of how existence came to be. And that is from the Dibur of Hashem, God's speech, which in turn is connected to his thought, connected to his attributes and faculties, all the way up before the Tzimtzum, to the Pshmoy HaKol B'Atzmusei, the way God first wanted to have some form of expression, his ability to express himself, the Yechelis, as we discussed, the Yechelis, which is even higher than any form of expression, but is God's Yechelis, and that unity, where everything there is united, should permeate all the levels, all the way down into existence. And there they're all B'Telim U'Miyuchadim, and that's B'Shmoy Echad. Not just Hu Echad, but a Shmoy Echad. And Rebbe Rashab added, you could say, Hu Avay Echad, the Shmoy Echad, is Chayui V'Garmui, relatively speaking, on those levels, like energies and containers. So, though there aren't actually energies and containers, but conceptually there are in the 10 hidden spheres, and even higher than that. Like he said, higher than Atzilus, where you can't even say Chayui V'Garmui, because everything is Oyer. So that's Avay L'Kimu Chad Mamish. And also in Atzilus, that unity manifests in Avay L'Kim Kul Echad, because the Tzimtzum is also the power of Atzmus, just like Gilui. And in addition to the fact that the whole Tzimtzum is in order to bring revelation, and the whole revelation was in order to be transmitted through the Tzimtzum to the recipients. So with that, I can't say concludes the whole topic, but concludes the section, essentially what Hamayrik Be'echad is, and what means with all your kavana. That's the Hamayrik Be'echad, the Kantar kavana, the full intention of the extended contemplation of reaching from existence and connecting and uniting it to its source, all the way to the highest levels. So that sums up what we learned until the end of the paragraph on page 1424. But to tie together some more knots and some more topics, as I began prefacing yesterday in the previous class, he's now going to attach Kocho-Kavonoso, another aspect to it, which he did not mention. And this brings us back to page 1411. In 1411, when he went over from the topic of who and Ato, when he's speaking about who, Seviv Klam, he spoke that there's an Avodah Pitam V'das. That's the Avodah when we are dealing with the Neshama comes down below. So like we spoke about, the Neshama does not have, it's a dark world. The Neshama does not have light on its own. It's fundamentally Ner Hashem Nishma Sadim, it's a flame of God, but because it gets concealed inside the body and the animal soul, so the Neshama begins its Avodah first al Pitam V'das, which means a logical contemplation where you come to realize, like we spoke about, Mamala Kalalman, that there's an existence, someone put the existence into place. You come to realize the divine energy within existence. That leads us to the next level of Avodah. That's b'chol levavcha. B'chol nafshecha, afil neitles nafshecha mesiris nefesh. Seviv kalam. That the divine is beyond existence. It's not just that there's an artist that created this art, but that God is beyond being an artist. And that leads not so much, as he said, to a love that is integrating and wants more of God's gilui. They're the opposite. You want to be absorbed in that higher level because you realize its superiority. Because it's not the divine within existence, then you want to connect to that. But it's the divine beyond existence. That was the second level, what he called Hu. But then there's a deeper level of Hu, like we learned, that the real Hu is Hashem, when he spoke about the pasuk Chad Hu Tov Mekulu in the Medrash that said, Hu Hashem Elokeinu b'chol haaretz. And interesting, he says the words Hu Hashem Elokeinu, both Hashem and Elokim. Mishpat of Shemidus Rachem of Le'elam. That was the text of the Medrash that the Rebbe Rashab has been analyzing. So there you have all the aspects, the ultimate unity of Hashem and Elokim, with the Avodah Pitam V'das Mamala Kalam, more like Elokim. Havaya is the divine transcendence, Hu beyond existence, and then Hashem Elokeinu together, so uniting both of those unities, and that leads us to the highest level of Hu, of Atzmus, and Shemidas Rachem of Le'elam, like he explained, that's transforming even the Gvura, Gzar Din, also to Rachamim. So that's the connection, which we're going to learn about more as he elaborates in the next paragraph. So then comes the third level of Ahava, B'chol Meodecho, and that is not discussed until now. So now he's going to go to B'chol Meodecho and say that's another meaning in Kocho-Kavonoso when we say Amin Yesh Me'rabah, with all Kavana, Hamayr Be'echad, also is referring to the third level of unity, which is B'chol Meodecho. And he's going to explain that now briefly, and I'll elaborate as much as needed. So the new paragraph on page 1424, and this also is interesting, makes the connection that the Ma'arich Be'echad, which is in Shema, leads to V'haftas Hashem L'kecha B'chol Levavcha, B'chol Nafshecha, B'chol Meodecho. So it's like three levels in Achdus, in the contemplation, that lead to three levels of love. So he says, Gam Inyan, the pages can be found at ayinbeis.com if you want to follow the text. It says, Gam Inyan B'chol-Kavonoso, the Inyan of Kocho-Kavonoso, another aspect of it, Hu B'chinas Ha'aved B'chol Meodecho, is the love of B'chol Meodecho. So B'chol Levavcha means all your heart, including the Yetzer Hara, Shnei Yetzerecha, both sides of the heart, the divine soul, the animal soul, which of course plays prominent in the Maimer HaMagbi L'Sheves, where the divine soul through Shema affects and educates and trains the animal soul. B'chol nafshecha is like mesiris nefesh, nafshecha, with all your soul, not just with all your heart. And b'chol meodecho means all your might and ma'od. Ma'od, of course, is a level when you say toiv ma'od, very good. So the very goes beyond just the parameters, even of b'chol levavcha and b'chol nafshecha. So it refers to Ahava B'chol Meodecho Shen Isbar Le'il, that was discussed earlier. And where's that earlier? Page 1411. Though he doesn't mention B'chol Meodecho, he does mention Gimel Avos. So if you go there, you'll see we discussed it at the time. He mentions three levels of Ava, and he spells out B'chol Nafshecha primarily there. But he says Gimel Mine Avos Yesh Lemer. And then he started the whole discussion, the three Madregas Klolis, Mamala, Seviv, and Atzmus. That's higher than Seviv and Mamala. So now he's concluding what we learned there, which also connects to what we've learned earlier as well, which I'm not going to go into right now when we spoke about Mutfa, Murgish, Muskul. So he says like this, that the three levels of love, which is B'chol Levavcha, B'chol Nafshecha, B'chol Meodecho, Hein Ba'gimul Madregas Klolus, are in general three levels. What he said before, Mamala Kalam, the divine within existence, the divine beyond existence, Mamala and Seviv respectively, and Atzmus, which is higher than both and unites them both. And in that order, because you cannot jump to the highest if you don't go through the lower. That's the process of how we function. Just like we grow, we have to grow step by step. So he says, Atzmus ein sof shalamayla b'chinas seviv kalam mamala kalam. This level of Atzmus ein sof, which is higher than seviv kalam, which is transcendence, Umamaliklan, which is immanence, the divine energy within existence. He Ahava the b'chol Meodecho. That's the Ahava, the third level of Ahava b'chol Meodecho with all your ma'oid. Could be all your might, many different ways you could define it, but it's ma'oid more than just the first two levels of Ahava. The Hainu, the b'chinas iskalus mamish ba'atzmus ein sof. So this is referring to being completely encompassed in Atzmus ein sof. So we're talking now the levels we learned earlier, like before the Tzimtzum. Not just the divine of in Atzilus, which is Mamal Klam, or higher than Atzilus, which is Sevav Klam, but also Atzmus. The three levels we talked about before the Tzimtzum. One was Aleis HaRatzon, where God arose in his desire, the 10 hidden spheres, the Shemesh, Lashon Rabbim. That would be the root, ultimately, of Mamal Kalam, the divine that relates to existence. Even though before the Tzimtzum, you can't use those words, but relatively speaking, that's that level. Koydem Aleis HaRatzon is only Shem Echad. That's like the root of Sevav Kalam. And the third level is Shem HaKol B'Atzmusei, what we call Hu Shmai V'Shmai Hu V'Shmai and Hu Shmai V'Shmai Hu, the level of Yechelis or Helam HaAtzmi, as it is all the way in Atzmus that he called Yechelis before as being that level of Atzmus Ein Sof, and that's where B'chol Meodecho relates to. Iskalus and Atzmus Ein Sof. So this is now, he's adding now this aspect that is the level of B'chol Meodecho. And now he's going to explain this more specifically in the next few lines, the next section, we can call it. Va'inyan hu. And what's the inyan in this? So he says, it's like what's written elsewhere, the Masher Koser b'Sefer Shabbein in Perik Yotes, that what it says in Tanya, chapter 19, B'inyan b'chinas koyach ha'chochma shevenefesh. So let me first tell you what it says there. In chapter 18 in Tanya, and then continuing in chapter 19 primarily, he talks about that every neshama has also Ahava Misoteres, has a natural inherent love to God. Not through Avodah. We're just born with it. And he compares the neshama actually to Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, like a flame that's naturally always seeking and longing to reach its source. You see the flame defies gravity and reaches naturally, even though it'll become Eis Metzias as it reaches upward. Still, that's what it longs. It wants to reach its source. So he said, what is that in Ruchnius? He says, that's the Chochma Shebenefesh. Chochma, that is Koyach Ma, is a level of bittul. The Chochma is always longing to be encompassed in its source. That's why it's only a spark. So he's now going to discuss that level that he explains in Tanya. So it says elsewhere, that what it says in Tanya, that in the nefesh there's a power of chochma. Bina is I comprehend, I understand. Chochma is more the bittul of the person who's understanding to the source of where the seichel is coming from. So it's a bittul shalamayla matam v'das, shazel al derech moshel, like he says there in Tanya. That's like the example. K'may oir ha'esh, like the fire of a flame, the light of a flame, chofetz, b'teva liporid mahapsila. By nature, it wants to separate from the wick. You see the flame, if you think about it, the flame is not comfortable settling into the wick. It's always seems to be, wants to leave the wick and reach upward to its source. Ulidovek b'sharshe, and to attach to its root. This is all from Tanya. So that flame, that's the level he calls Chochma Shebenefesh. V'af sh'al yedei zeh, the Tanya continues. And even though through this, it'll become no longer a flame, because let's say the flame gets what it wants, and the wick wasn't there to ground it and to hold it down, which means there was no body, there was no grounding for the soul, what would happen? The flame would expire. There would be no longer a flame. It would be encompassed in its source. So he says, Af sh'al yedei zeh would be nizbatlim mitziyusei. That's what he says. Nevertheless, it still wants that, because that's its nature. It wants to go back into its source, into where it originates from. So notice when a neshama has that naturally. When we sense that, when you realize where you really come from, You come from such a superior level called Elikus, and now he's talking about all the way in the highest levels. We'll soon see how he puts the context of Tanya in this discussion of B'chol Meodecho. That's what the soul wants. Kach nishmas adam, he says there in Tanya, so too, like the flame wants to be absorbed or dissolved into its source, same with the soul of a human being. V'chein ruach v'nefesh, and not just neshama, but also ruach v'nefesh. Remember, there's 3 levels in the soul: nefesh, ruach, neshama. So not just the neshama level, which is a higher level. You could say neshama is like Chabad, but also the ruach v'nefesh, the lower levels, meaning all the 10 faculties of the soul. Chefza v'cheshka b'tiva liporit. Its desire and its nature is to separate from its material connection and the gravitational pull of this world. That's what a neshama is. That's why a neshama is always restless, flickering, always seeking. It's not comfortable in this world. It always has that transcendent need, the need to transcend its environment. Ulidabik b'sharsha u'mekeda, and to attach to its root and its source. B'Hashem chaya chayim baruch hu. This is all the language of Tanya. This is literally word for word from Tanya. In the chaya chayim, which means the source of all life, the life of all life, God baruch hu, meaning Hashem. Hagam sheti ayin ve'efes v'tizbatel. Like with the flame, he said before. Even though by doing so, the neshama loses its identity. It'll become ayin ve'efes and completely nullified in its source. Like think of the sunlight. Sunlight outside of the sun shines and illuminates and warms. But the light, as it's encompassed in the sun, becomes completely bottled to the sun. Nevertheless, then that's what the neshama desires, by nature. Nevertheless, that's his desire. Its will and its desire, betiva, in its nature. So it's not even through Avodah. It's just the nature of a flame is that way, the nature of the soul is that way. And how does it express itself in our lives? The fact that you have some restlessness and you're not comfortable with animal bliss and just being static, that you have some measure of angst in whatever you're seeking. Now, every person has that. There are times we're very comfortable, it's true, and we can be apathetic, but that's not your soul speaking. But when your soul is active, that's what it does. And that's why there's no person that doesn't have moments, or sometimes more than moments, of that type of longing. With some type of existential longing that we have naturally within us, because that's the nature of the soul.
Can you take a question?
Not middle of the sentence. Let me finish the whole subject, and then we'll take questions. So, Ahava became Zed Tzena v'chefza b'tiva, v'zeu rak mitzad she'retzena li'kolel. And that's due only to the desire to be encompassed. We're not talking about it's actually being encompassed, because like the flame wants to go there, and that's why it's reaching upward. So it has that transcendent nature, but it's not actually being encompassed. So at the same time, that's a constant longing and desire of the soul, but it's not actually skalus mamish. The soul is not achieving that. That's why we say al karcha chatachai, and the neshama comes down below. It's forced to be here below. It could desire to reach upward and have a very strong desire, but that desire is not granted. And as a matter of fact, that's not the kavanah to go up and remain there. The kavanah is to be down here and have that restlessness and that transcendence. Aval b'chinas ha-keser, that's chochma in the nefesh. So koyach ha-chochma is that longing. What's keser in Avodah, based on the Tanya? Ha-keser b'Avodah haynu shu b'chinas iskalus mamish. Keser in Avodah Sa'adam is it's actually iskalus mamish. We're not talking about chochma. Chochma remains the spark of chochma that longs to reach. Keser is actually being encompassed. Like the spark that's encompassed in the torch. Not just longing to be encompassed, but actually being encompassed in it. And that's what he says in Tanya chapter 50. that after the first state, where the soul longs to be encompassed in God, it actually comes to that level of Klei Nefesh, Kocho-Kavonoso, V'gam Kol Nafshi. That in addition to my longing, also Kol Nafshi, my soul actually was absorbed within the source. So just bringing it back to what he wants to say, a few more lines, and then I'll stop for questions. V'yesh and we can say, Shezeu Inya Rabbi Akiva. This is the level of what we talk about Rabbi Akiva when he went in with his 3 colleagues into the Pardes, into the orchard, which is considered to be a spiritual experience, a spiritual transcendent experience. And the 3 of them all got hurt in the process because it was too intense. One died, Hitzitzumes, one went mad, literally, and one became an apostate. Rabbi Akiva was the only one that says, Nichnus b'shalom, v'yotze b'shalom. He entered in peace and came out in peace. Doesn't mean in one piece. It means peace, shalom, as in harmony. He was able to integrate it, basically. Shazeo b'chinas harotzei de toyu mamish. So this is literally the rotzei of toyu mamish, where you're literally yearning and actually being encompassed in the source. B'chinas koloyin. So that's because he didn't do that when he was not in that transcendent state. So he did actually have the koloyin. However, but he had the presence of mind to realize that the kavanah is not to remain there, but also have to also leave and bring that state of transcendence into the shuv, meaning integrating it into his life. The other 3 could not do that, and that's why they had their shviras hakelim, each in their own way. There's some dissonance, some break happened. So now he's saying this is the level of, seems to be b'chol Meodecho. B'chol Kocho-Kavonoso b'Ahava, the b'chol Meodecho. Through this level of b'chol koche with all his might, like b'chol Meodecho, and which means with the whole kavana of hamayich be'echad, with a love of b'chol Meodecho, u'b'chinas hayichud kanal, and the state of yichud, this type of yichud that you're reaching and encompassing, not just chochma longing, but also being encompassed in the source. Mamshichim b'chinas Atzmus ein sof, we draw down from Atzmus ein sof, liyas b'chinas hagdolas hakoyach, like he said, ata yigdal na koyach adnai, we're drawing down a new level of energy beyond the koyach adnai. I'm actually yagdil koyach adnai, ata yigdal koyach adnai. We're strengthening it because of our Avodah. That in addition draws down a deeper dimension. Shagam b'chinas koyach ma'asev, that also on the level of koyach ma'asev, God's koyach, as we said twice, Yudalad, the 2 Yadayim. Ayin Beis hakavim the yamin small yad yad. That's the energy of the divine within existence, like mamala kalaman. Sheyeir b'mechinas Atzmus. There should radiate from level of Atzmus. Shayidezeh gam kavas smile. Through that, also the left side, Yehofech nepach liyamin de be'er pnei melachayim. That also the gvura, like we said, is also transformed into yamin, into the right, be'er pnei melachayim, in the light of the shining face of God, the shining countenance of this higher level. Okay, so this is, you see, he's losing language from the previous pages, but bottom line, what he's added here, and this is the summation, that this level of b'chol koche, b'chol Kavonoso, ma'irich be'echad, remember, it doesn't just go a few levels, it goes all the way into Atzmus ein sof. So the first few levels are l'chol avavcha, b'chol nafshecha, mamala kalam, and sevav kalam. And now we're talking about being encompassed in Atzmus, what he calls here, that being totally encompassed in it, and that's a level that you draw now a whole deeper dimension, and that's drawn down into existence, that also in the lower levels, you also experience this highest level of unity. That the koyach adnai is mimnimshach in koyach meiser, like we learned earlier. What still needs explanation is the level of Keser. Because Keser, initially you could say, is the level of Chochma would be the level of Mamala Kalalman, and Keser would be the level of Sevav Kalalman, and then there's Atzmus higher, but you could also interpret it a little differently. Chochma is the level not just of Mamala Kalamin, that you're at peace with the divine within you. That would be Bina and lower levels. Chochma is already a yearning, so that would be like B'chol Vavcha, a yearning. Then B'chol Nafshecha would be Keser, would be, no, I'm sorry, that would be Bina. Chochma would be already, there's a yearning. Keser would then be the highest level, and in macrocosm, that would be the level of what he calls Nichel Ba'atzmus. I have to think about that a bit more. Or you could say there's two levels in Keser, but I'll have to think how the struggle. Let's see if he adds any more words in the next section, and then maybe I'll be able to pinpoint it more in detail. Okay, so I wanted to read this whole section in order to understand exactly how he was connecting it all. But you can see it's all dense. But on the other hand, we did learn earlier all these ideas. He's just tying it all together as he comes to conclude this section in Ayin Beis.
B'chol Avavcha does make sense as Bina because Bina Halev, right?
You could say that, yes. But earlier he did speak about Bina being, Panemius Bina being who, which he said was B'chol Nafshecha, to be honest, on page 1411. So I have to look it through. That's why I said I need more time to review it.
I didn't understand Elisheva's comment about Bina Halev.
It says in Tana Dvelia Bina Halev Uba Halev Mevin, so the heart understands, the Bina of the heart. So he's saying, but in the Shema it says B'chol Avavcha, B'chol Nafshecha, B'chol Meodecha. So Rabbi Simon was saying maybe there are three levels. He's saying maybe, not for sure, but maybe the B'chol Avavcha is Bina, B'chol Nafshecha is Chochma, B'chol Meodecha is Keser.
Oh, I see. Got it. So, can I ask a question, or were you finished, Elisheva?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, if the neshama has a natural tendency, like the spark of a flame, to want to rise, to merge with its source, um, it seems as though there's a natural instinct within the human being, essentially, to not want to be here in this world. Now, I'm not saying that that's the tachlis of it, because we understand the tachlis of it is that the neshama is sent down here for a reason, to be masakin the mavar the tzitzos, and to make this world the dwelling place, etc., etc., etc. But in its constitution, it seems like the neshama is not happy here, and I have to say, just speaking from personal testimony, I can relate to this. So, I'm how does one what?
Yeah, go ahead.
How does one reconcile that the Abishter would put the neshama into a place where it's intrinsically, inherently uncomfortable, anxious, not restless is the word you used. I'll wave the white flag and call it anxiety. And into a place that's it's not in harmony. Now it's got a mission, and it's got a holy divine mission, but isn't there? I just said sort of. Yeah, go ahead.
You've never learned about this in Chassidus anywhere?
Well, I don't probably, but maybe you can connect the dots here for me a little bit.
Okay.
Yes, I've heard this before.
First of all, I wouldn't. I deliberately did not use the word anxiety, nor unhappy, words that you did use. I used the word restless, and I used the word angst very deliberately, because it's actually the redeeming factor of a human being. An animal does not have this level of restlessness. That's why animals live in the same habitats and are very comfortable. What we call, I used before the word animal bliss. They don't have this level of a neshama because they don't need it. It's not their personality. The Friedrich Rebbe puts it this way: the animal never saw heaven. So a behemoth walks on all four. It looks down. Ruach ha-behemoth yeredes lamato, it says. The spirit of the animal, the breath of the animal, and the spirit of the animal looks downward. It looks at its offspring, at the grass, survival. That's what it's all about. Nefesh Elikis, or call it neshama, has the flame personality that it seeks transcendence. That's the word I kept using, transcendence. Now, for some people, where it cuts to a point of anxiety and sadness and unhappiness, there you could say it's not necessarily purely the neshama, it could be to other factors in their lives. I'm not here to analyze you or anybody, but every soul has that element of a flickering flame that's seeking something. That's what you see human beings seek. Now, when they're very comfortable, they're making money, and they're in their comfort zones, they usually don't seek so much because that flame gets somewhat quieted. But you'll see, especially in times when people are challenged, that flame comes more alive. So bottom line is this a natural thing, and it's actually a positive, that the neshama was sent down to this world to transform this world. If the neshama would get too comfortable here, it would never transform anything. You're not motivated. So the whole point of the soul, I'm not just speaking to you, by the way.
I know.
Everyone. So
I know. No,
let
I'm
me
liking
explain
it
for the whole topic.
Yeah.
So the very personality of a soul gives it its power, that it comes into tachtonim, and we learn clearly that it comes down and it's concealed in this world. The soul does not retain in a revealed way its connection all the way to the highest levels. That's why it needs an outside light. The siyua of an outside light, like the eye cannot see in the dark. But at the same time, the soul is still alive and kicking. And that's so-called the power that motivates us and pushes us. Like Misha Yeshle Mana Reitz Masayim. If you have 100, you want 200. The constant Yelcha Mechayel El Chayel, going from strength to strength and pushing someone, propelling them to greater heights. So the truth is, the neshama therefore has to have two aspects, like we just learned about Rabbi Akiva. One is that it should always long to reach higher states. You never want to lose that. On the other hand, you don't want to completely be consumed by that either. It needs to be, that's the rotze, you need the shuv. That the soul needs to be told, I said before, al korcha chatachai. The soul doesn't want to come down into this world. Why would it want to come down into a dark world like this? But God says, this is where you need to go. This is my shlichus to you. This is the purpose. And when you do go down, not only do you fulfill my purpose and the ultimate purpose, which you can never fulfill in heaven, where there's no body and there's no health issues and there's no parnos issues and there's no darkness and there's no corruption and no hostility and so on, but also you, the neshama itself, will grow through the process, because when you're challenged, it'll bring out your deepest strengths. So all this is explained obviously in many places in Chassidus, and that's the balance. Now, like it is in everything. You look at the wave of a cardiogram. It's a rotze and a shuv. There's peaks and valleys. You just don't want extremes, but you want that constant movement of tension and resolution. Tension and resolution in a healthy way. Now, if it goes to extremes, whether it's extreme anxiety or the other way around, extreme passivity, then you need to do things to balance that out. That could be due to other factors in life and so on. But obviously, a dead person, God forbid, can't be depressed, nor can they be euphoric. So the very fact that we are alive means that we're going to have these cycles and these rhythms. You just want to keep them balanced. Like in the case of Rabbi Akiva, that's the nichnus b'shalom v'yotze b'shalom, the perfect harmony. The other three could not handle it. The light was too strong. The energy, the experience was too intense, and each one of them suffered in a different way because of that lack of balance. And that's a constant process that you need to achieve. You have stories, for example, the Alter Rebbe learning with the Rabbi Avram HaMalach. The Maggid's son was called Avram HaMalach. Why was he called Malach, like an angel? Because he was really not so connected to this material world. And he was like an angel in this physical world. And they would learn at times, it says that Avram HaMalach would get so ecstatic from the experience that the Alter Rebbe sensed that his soul was going to expire. Like exactly here, the flame was going to leave its body. So the Alter Rebbe gave him a bagel, and sometimes says a bagel with butter to ground him. You hear when the Rabbeim said Maimorim, they held a handkerchief. When the Nevi'im prophesied, they would hold on to something physical. Because every deep spiritual experience needs something to ground it, this Rotze and Shuv balance. Nadav and Avihu is the classic example of two people who went into the Holy of Holies, but they did not come out. They were consumed by what? By Eish Zara, by a strange and alien flame, fire. All these are examples of a Rotze that did not have a proper Shuv. And the goal is obviously both to maintain that balance. So you have to have the restlessness, at the same time, you have to resolve it in some way integrated. And this is a constant dance of life.
Well, first of all, that was beautiful. Thank you very much. And it really helped contextualize my question. The other part of my question is actually going the opposite direction. You'll forgive the pun. That Chochma is Koachma, and that the spark of an idea, if you will, is just that. It's flickering and it's sort of ephemeral. So if that being the case, what makes the rest of the I guess it's the mind. I don't think it's the soul per se that wants to go into being and process it. Is that the fact that the neshama is in the goof, and in other words, the nefesh hasichlis somehow grabs on and says, "Oh, well, hold on a second, not so quick, don't go away. I want to understand this better. I want to figure this out." What keeps? I mean,
or
what?
Even Chochma itself senses that the kavana is not to go back to the source.
The takfis is to have a shuv.
It's like a teacher who may be very desired to be with his teacher, but he knows he has to be a teacher's student.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. That was some really helpful Chassidus applied, and I just put the therapy bill in the mail.
Okay. Okay, so here we have the addition that b'chol keiche b'chol kavanose is the Ahava b'chol Meodecho. As I said, I have to work out a little more with the spheres, how it works with Chochma and Keser. Because earlier, for sure, he said Bina was b'chol nafshecha. That's like Seviv. So Chochma would be... Okay. I have to work that out. But let's continue on. And hopefully it'll become clear. But the levels are pretty clear. Kocho-Kavonoso. Okay. This is... And now he goes back to the beginning topic. This is literally tying all the threads and the strings together. If you work your way backwards, you'll see. So I said page 1411 was the topic of B'chol Levavcha, B'chol Nafshecha. And then he's going to connect it, remember now also, to the transformation of the Gevura to Yamin, like he just did. So now, you may recall on page 1413, I think it was, he more the Medrash Rabbah of the Chamisha Hu, L'Teva and Chamisha L'Ra. So the level of Hu, he said there was B'chol Nafshecha. But even a higher level of Hu is Atzmus, Tov Mekulim. So now he says like this. The 5 times that it says Hu, L'Teva is the 5 Chesodim. The 5 times it says Hu L'Ra is the 5 Gvuras. And then there's a Hu of the Eibishter that's higher than both of them. Higher than both. So he says now like this. V'zeu Chamisha L'Teva v'Chamisha, the opposite direction. So again, to refresh your memory, we go back to page 1413. That's where we discussed that medrash. V'nizbar le'il, and we learned earlier on page 1415, shezeh b'chinas hei chesadim v'hei gvuras. The 5 chesadim, like the 5 fingers on the right hand, 5 fingers on the left hand. So that's the 5 where it says 5 times Hu, like Avram. He said Hu Avram. And the opposite would be like Nimrod, Hu Nimrod. So you see it both in Gedusha, in Tzadikim, and in Rishayim, in the negative. And he explained the difference between the two back there. Let me just go back a second and look at it for a quick look. Yeah. How the klippas came to emerge from the Achdus. Okay, so it says like this now. That's the level of koyach, because koyach is, as I said, base pomim yad. 28 is twice 14, referring to the 2 hands, yad yamin, b'chinas yad yamin v'yad smel. So you have 14 in the right hand, 14 joints, 5 fingers, but 14 joints, 14 joints in the left hand. Together they make up koyach. Like we said, koyach maisov, the koyach that God used to create existence in the structure of right and left. Then you have the Avodah Sa'adam, Ata Yigdal Na Koyach Adnai, that's deeper than Koyach Maisov, that accesses all the way the higher sources of the divine and draws it down. And that's what the Medrash concludes, Aval Islon Chadhu. There's one Hu that's higher than all of them. He called it Tov Mikulam. So the Hu, 5 times that it says Hu, L'Tev, and 5 times that it says Hu, the opposite of Tev, then the Medrash says clearly that then there is Chadhu, Tov Mikulam, that's greater than them all. And who is that? That's Hashem Elokeinu. That's the level of the Atzmus. Hu b'chinas Kava Emtzoi. That's the Kava Emtzoi. The third path, the middle path. B'chinas Teferes. We learned earlier Teferes, the Eir and Keli are like one. Sha'ela Ada Keser. Teferes being the third rod, the middle one goes straight up to Keser. So it's high, it reaches higher than Chesed and Gvura. The Hainu Primis Keser, the less smoila. The inner dimension of Keser, where there's less smoila, there's no smoil. Smoil as in there's no negative Gvura, there's no concealment. Bahayatika. Ubeshorshe, Kehiri clearly is saying that this is Primis Keser. So that really, I think, explains this, what we learned before about Keser and Avodah. Because there's 2 levels. There's Chechenis Keser, Primis Keser. Ubeshorshe, what is this root? Ubchinis Primis, v'atzmus ein sof, b'chinis shmoya atzmi. So we learned microcosm, macrocosm. That what Primis Keser is, higher than Atzilus, refers to the third and highest level before the Tzimtzum, which is Shmoya Kol Batzmusei. So like Alois HaRatzon would be like the root of Mamala Kalaman, Kedem Alois HaRatzon is like Chitzenius Keser, and Primius Keser would be like Shmoya Kol Batzmusei, Ukamoshin is Bar Le'il, as we learned earlier. Yeah, so clearly the Rebbe Rashab, I think, sensed that what he said before Keser, he's now actually explaining it, that there's 2 levels in Keser. So Chochma is the longing. Keser, he says, is being encompassed, but clearly he means Primis Keser. But there's also Chetzenis Keser. He's going to talk about that now. Okay, so what he added now was the connection to the 5 Chesed, 5 Gvura, and Tov Mekulim, the third level that's higher than them all. So in a way, you could say the 5 Chesed is like Havaya, Gilui. The 5 Gvura is like Tzimtzum, Elikim. And then he says, Havaya Lekenu is the Tov Mekulim, is the joining of them both, as we learned earlier, Hashem Hu Elikim, to the point that it becomes Chad Mamish.
Is Shmo HaAtzmi the same as Shmo HaGadol?
We spoke about Shmo HaGadol has several levels. You could say Shmo HaGadol in general is the Shmo before the Tzimtzum.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you break it down, the highest level of Shmo HaGadol is Shmo HaAtzmi.
Okay.
On top of 1421, he said, Amitis in Shmo HaAtzmi hu hakol b'atzmusei. Generally speaking, yes. The answer is yes, but there are levels in that itself. Okay. So let's go on to explain this. It'll be easier to understand. And then we'll go, okay. But Inyan hu, and what's the Inyan in this? The Hine, Habeis Kavim, the 2 Kavim of Chesed and Gvura are also Shoshim Gamkein. Gamkein Shoshim B'chinas HaKeser. Where do they come from? They also come from Keser. Everything comes from Keser. Keser is the source of everything in Atzilus. B'yadua, the Hainu B'chinas Chetzenis HaKeser. But it's known that comes from the outer dimension of Keser. The Sham Shayach Gamkein is Chalkus Kavim. There, you can still apply the concept of Chalkus Kavim, a distinction between tracks. Kavim is lines, like the right side and the left side. Like the Mittler Rebbe writes about this at length in the Maimer Vayera and Teres Chaim of the Mittler Rebbe. V'ayin b'mashin is bar le'il. The gam b'rotzen shaya b'chinas nechumim. It tells us to look earlier. I have to find where that is. That in rotzen is also nechumim means regrets, like nechama, meaning that there is the ability of shifts. Like he says at the end of Parsha Bereshis, that God said he regretted that he created existence. And we say, what do you mean God regretted? So you say that's on the lower level of Chitzenius Keser, which is rotzen, not tainug. Maybe you can look it up, Yitzchak, where where it says Ratzon Shaykh Nechumim. Maybe you can find where it was. I think it's earlier in this volume.
Okay.
Okay. Ubeshoshei. This is all in Keser. So there's Chitzenius Keser with his kavim. There's Pnimius Keser with his no kavim. That's the Tferes goes all the way into Pnimius Keser. Ubeshoshei. B'chinas Eirei Sof Shalifni Atzimtzum in the root. Like you see here again, in the microcosm and the macrocosm, in the root, before the tzimtzum, hu b'chinas alei sarotzen. That level is like alei sarotzen, like Chitzenius Keser, where already arose in his desire. Shesham b'chinas shemus loshen rabim kanal. There the shemus are already, there's plural. That means there's kavim, not actual ones, conceptual ones. So relative to before the tzimtzum, it's like the level of the outer dimension of Keser, which has levels, has kavim. Shemus Loshen Rabim. V'hainu, which means, this means, the Shir Asmei B'Kayach. He envisioned existence, B'Kayach, and he allocated resources, he established resources, Shir, means measured, within himself, what resources he would need to create, that's already some form of envisioning a structure. Shezeu B'B'chinas Mokar Al Koponim. That you could at least, you can't call it a true source, but you call it a mucker because it already is beginning to envision existence, like envisioning the building you want to build. You haven't built it yet, but you're relating to it. That's why it's called the 10 hidden spheres. In order for there to be the distinction of the spheres, the 10 spheres, and in general, the distinction of kavim, which is tracks. A right, a left, a center. La'acharat tzimtzum. So it's a mocker for the spheres and the kavim that will emerge and be created after the tzimtzum. But where does it originate from? At least as a mocker al kaponim, in the alei sarotz. That's the lower level. V'zein chamisha hu. That's the chamisha hu, l'teva, and the chamisha the other way. Two kavim. The who hainu b'chinas helem, who in the lashon nister, the third person means it's concealed state, but it's the concealed state, not helem ha'atzmi. Is the concealed state compared to Chochma, compared to the spheres, it's concealed. Who b'sheiresh hakavim b'chinas hakeser is the root of these tracks in Keser. Rakshazah b'chinas helem ha'shayach halagili. But this concealment still relates to Gili. It's not completely removed. It's not fundamentally concealed. Aval Islan Chad, who, but the who, that one, we say Avaya Lekenu, Hainu B'chinas Helema Atzmi Dein Sof. That's the Helema Atzmi, that fundamentally concealed, not relative to the Gili. It's not like it's not revealed yet, but it's about to be revealed. So it's the Helema Atzmi. And this level you cannot call even the source of the source. Like we spoke about the concept of the concept, the theory of the theory, the archetype of the archetype. You can't even call it that to the Mokar Ischalkus HaKavim Kulu. Now, he's going to connect it yet to one more topic, but I don't want to overwhelm us all, so maybe I'll stop here, because he's going to connect it now to the who. If you remember, HaMufla, Samach Le'ish, he's talking about the Mufla Shebes Sanhedrin. Like Moshe Rabbeinu, higher than the 70 Skenim. So now he's going to tie it back to the beginning of the topic. This all began when he spoke about, if you recall, the 70 Skenim, the 70 leaders, are 70, 10 times 7, because they already relate, Einei Ha'edah, they're the eyes of the nation. And Moshe, he said, was higher than that. We're going back now to Let's see here. Wow, a while back. Well, back to page 14. A few places. I'm gonna have to look it up more detail. Yeah. Page 1410 and 1411. I want to see where he first brought. Yeah, but I'll wait till tomorrow. Let's learn that in the next class. Just a lot here, and I want to make sure we have it all structured as much as possible. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Any questions?
Just FYI, I looked for Nechumim, and there's only 3 references in all of Ayin Beis, and one is on page 1237, which it's very general and vague, and at the bottom of 1237, and the other one is in Chelik Aleph, which seems to be a little more relevant, although it's hard for me to be sure. It says that Zeu shebesecho shaykh nechumim k'mo shekasav ki lo adam hu lahanachem ledavko v'lo adam lo yesh nechumim al b'tzir adam sheikor hu asecho shaykh nechumim. I don't know if that's relevant or not.
I think you're referring to the bottom of page 1237, the first one that you just mentioned.
Uh-huh. That's even more cryptic.
It's not so cryptic if you read the whole thing.
It's tzir adam, the metzach and
It's
all
not
that.
just the language, it's the content. The content is there.
Oh yeah, okay.
That's what I was looking for.
Okay. I could, well,
Yeah.
maybe you can explain that tomorrow, because to me it's a little cryptic.
You got to learn the whole 2 pages there.
Yeah.
Yeah. In volume 1, was it page 393?
I'm on I'm on a different platform.
Okay, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
1 second, I can tell you. 1B.
Yeah. Okay, good.
It's on page let's see here. 1108.
That's not volume 1. That's not volume 1.
It's one. It's. Well, sorry, 400. Sorry, I can't. I'm tired. It's
It's
600.
fine. It's fine. It's
608. 608.
Okay.
Taf Kuf Ches. I
That's
think that's
508.
508. See, I told you I can't count. Yeah.
Okay, I'll look it up.
It's on the bottom of 508 if you want to look at it later. Fourth line from the bottom.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, the bottom of page 1424, where we talked about this Helama Atzmi, who shall the Mailam becomes Bezdin. Yeah, we'll stop here. I'll stop the recording.